And oopsies. Move forward. Okay. All right. So the carbon cycle. Once again, these are all cycles. So they're talking about how things move through our ecosystem. So the same thing with the carbon cycle. It tells us how carbon moves from the atmosphere to the earth, to organisms, and then back up again. Carbon is normally in the form of carbon dioxide. When we talk about it in the carbon cycle, we're really talking about carbon dioxide. If the picture isn't labeled, normally you can tell it's the carbon cycle by looking for the word CO2, the chemical formula. You can also look at what's happening in the picture to tell it's the carbon cycle. So we're going to talk about that. Carbon is really important, especially because all living things, we call them organic compounds. You'll learn about that in physical science. But organic compounds make up living things. And in order for a compound to be organic, it has to include the elements carbon in it. Okay, so carbon another element, but you'll learn about that in physical science. Okay, all right. So let's talk about the carbon cycle. You should notice in the picture that there are a lot of words here that we've already learned this year that are happening in the carbon cycle. Okay, so the carbon cycle is going to have some parts that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it's going to have some parts that absorb, release carbon dioxide out of the ecosystem or into the ecosystem. I'm sorry, release it into the ecosystem, or that absorb carbon dioxide and take it into the organism. All right. So releasing carbon dioxide. If you notice, this list is kind of long. There are quite a few things that release carbon dioxide into our ecosystem. And that means the arrow is going to go out of the object. So combustion is one example. Here you can see the smoke coming out of the chimney. So anytime you burn something that was once living, whether that's wood or fossil fuels like gasoline or oil, then it is combusting it, which means you are going to release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Respiration, when we exhale as animals and breathe out so we can make energy, when plants carry out respiration so they can make energy, that is going to also release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Also, when living things decay, or living matter decays or rots, if it's a dead tree or a dead animal, it's going to release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And also decaying waste. So if there's poop that's coming from any species, that waste is going to also, as it breaks down, release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we had three main ways that we're letting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So at the same time, we also have things that absorb carbon dioxide. So carbon can be absorbed, or carbon dioxide can be absorbed through photosynthesis. So when plants carry out photosynthesis, they're going to pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into their cells and their tissues. And so that's going to happen in the tree, in the grass, all flowers, all photosynthesizing organisms are going to pull carbon dioxide into their bodies and remove it from the air. And if you look at the oceans, which we don't have a picture of in this one, but I had to say it, oceans also absorb a huge amount of carbon dioxide because they have phytoplankton that carry out some type of photosynthesis as well. So I wanted to make sure I said that because a large amount of the carbon dioxide is absorbed by oceans. So we can't leave them out. So we have parts of our carbon cycle that release carbon dioxide or release carbon, and we have parts that absorb carbon dioxide or take carbon dioxide out of our ecosystem. All right, so what happens when we have too much carbon dioxide being released and not enough carbon dioxide being absorbed? We know as humans now, we burn a lot of fossil fuels. Lots of people drive cars, factories burn coal. So we're releasing more and more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's not just us breathing out or carrying out respiration. And then the only things that were absorbing that carbon dioxide, were trees or plants. and the oceans, the photosynthesizers in the ocean. So we are putting out more carbon dioxide than we are taking in. Unfortunately, our atmosphere, our planet, is pushing out more carbon dioxide than it's able to absorb in the plants. And if you look right here in this picture, we call this the greenhouse effect or global warming when that happens. So if you look at the planet, this layer right here is the Earth's atmosphere. Okay. And this is the sun. It's letting heat into our planet by shining on it. Some of that heat is reflected back. And then we have carbon dioxide that's coming off of the planet here. And that carbon dioxide is forming a layer in our atmospheres of carbon dioxide gas and other gases too. We call them greenhouse gases. And as they are there, they trap the heat and don't allow the heat to go out into the solar system. They're keeping the heat close to the planet. And this is not good. It warms the overall temperature of the planet and causes lots of huge issues that we'll talk about a little bit later this summer when we talk about human impact on the environment. So the way that I think about that is if you've ever been in a greenhouse, what's it feel like in there? If you've ever been there, it usually has glass all around the sides. If you don't know what a greenhouse looks like, probably should have inserted a picture. But anyway, if you're in a greenhouse and it's really warm and it's usually kind of damp in there, and that's because it's bringing in all of the sunlight, but it's not really letting it out. It's keeping the heat inside. Reminds me of if you have a bowl of food and you have saran wrap on top and you stick it in the microwave and you nuke it. When you take it out, all of that heat is trapped inside of that bowl. You can even see sometimes the condensation and steam on the saran wrap on top. And when you peel the saran wrap back, it lets the heat and the steam out. Okay. So that's kind of what's happening to our planet. The layer of carbon dioxide is kind of like a layer of saran wrap around the planet. And instead of letting the heat out, it traps all the heat and it keeps the heat around the surface of our planet, causing the water in the oceans to be warmer, causing ice caps to melt, and lots of other issues. So, too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a problem. It is not good for our planet. And so, we need to work on reducing the amount of carbon dioxide that we push out. All right, so how do we do that? We're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of our lesson, which is to watch a brain pop video on the carbon cycle. Before we do that, we're going to turn in our student workbooks to the carbon cycle page, and we're also going to look at the chart that's there. So we're in our student workbook, we're scrolling it on down. Here we are. We see the picture. It says use the video and the explain. Oh, I'm supposed to put way too far down. I apologize. Okay, so this is not it. Okay, here we go. So in our chart, it gives you the steps of the carbon cycle up front, combustion of fossil fuels and wood, etc., decaying organisms and waste, photosynthesis, respiration. And then it says, is the carbon released or absorbed? Circle one. So you can circle the word released or absorbed. Is it being released into the atmosphere or is it being absorbed by organisms? And then the next thing is um, what organisms are involved in this step. So one of the things you need to learn in this standard is to be able to tell the difference between the major steps of the each cycle, so the water cycle, the carbon cycle, and also tell which organisms are involved in doing those steps. So that's what we're going to do here. You're going to circle all of the letters that are correct as far as the organisms that carry out this step. So P is for producers, C is for consumers, B is for bacteria, and D is for decomposers. Now we're looking at this before we watch the video so that one, you can see if you already can figure out some of the answers based on what you already saw, and two, so you know what to look for as we watch the rest of the watch the brain pop video. Okay, so you have two more questions here at the bottom. It says, what are two ways that humans can reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that's released into the atmosphere? How can we help? You're going to type one of those in each of these boxes here. Okay, so we are ready to move forward, guys. And we're going to watch our brain pop video. It's going to probably push me back out. All right, so we're in Brain Pop. I've already logged in. If you didn't, you can use the same login as we did before. And we're going to watch this quick video about the carbon cycle.
Dear Tim and Moby, what can you tell me about the carbon cycle? From Atoll. Well, carbon is the fourth most common element in the universe. It's the building block for all life on Earth. Every single cell and every living thing contains some carbon. Carbon is common in non-living matter too, in rocks and soil, dissolved in seawater, inside the Earth's mantle, and in the air as carbon dioxide. Earth's carbon is constantly flowing from one of these forms to another. That's the carbon cycle. It's like the water cycle, only a bit more complex. Animals add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere when they breathe, and plants soak up carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, storing the carbon in their cells. Plants, especially trees, are known as carbon sinks because they take more carbon out of the atmosphere than they add to it. The oceans are carbon sinks too. Thanks mostly to marine life, oceans soak up more carbon dioxide than they release. When plants and animals die, the carbon contained in their bodies enters the Earth's crust. Earth's crust keeps carbon locked up for millions of years, eventually returning some of it to the atmosphere through volcanic eruptions. Normally, the carbon cycle keeps a pretty steady level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Lately, the cycle seems to have been thrown out of balance. More and more carbon dioxide is entering the atmosphere every year. It's probably because of human activities. We create tons of carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. And the clearing of rainforests in South America and Africa makes the problem worse in two ways. First, the burning trees add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And second, once the trees are gone, they're not soaking up any more carbon dioxide. Right, carbon dioxide is a major contributor to the greenhouse effect. That's the warming up that the Earth experiences because of certain gases in our atmosphere. Gases like carbon dioxide trap heat in the atmosphere and keep the Earth warm. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago, the carbon in the Earth's atmosphere has increased by about 40%. Most scientists agree that this has warmed the Earth up and that the warming could have devastating effects on the environment. Planting forests and finding alternative energy sources will help restore the balance, but we've got a long way to go. That should help too.
All right, so Tim and Moby helped us out with the carbon cycle. You should be able to go back to your student workbook, circle whether this step says that the carbon is released or absorbed, and then also identify whether it was producers, consumers, bacteria, or decomposers. Some of them might even be all four that help to do this, or to release or absorb that carbon, with combustion, decaying organisms and waste, photosynthesis, and respiration. All right, so once you've had a chance to do that and also type in your 2 ways that humans can reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we add to the atmosphere, then you can go ahead and we'll move on to our third cycle.